it's October 2003. We're in Lanai. I'm Ralph Sevenor. This is a cooperative project on behalf of ARIF, working with CSAA, Central Station Alarm Association, NBFA, National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association, and SIA, the Security Industry Association. I'm pleased to introduce an old friend of mine, Ron Spiller. Ron, you're going on year 35.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I'm here with Charlie Darsh, who was the chairman of ARIF, and this is actually Charlie's project. So actually, Ron, I'd like to open it up and find out, how did you get involved in the alarm industry?
Well, I think like many people, it was almost an accident of fate. I was working for an aerospace company in Barrington, Illinois.
What company?
It was called Chicago Aerial Industries, and it was owned by an electronics company out of California that decided that they wanted to diversify. So in 1969, they bought a manufacturing company in Puerto Rico that made ultrasonic motion detectors and asked me to go down there and run that company. Later on in that same year, they bought a company in Long Island that made rank surveillance cameras. And in 1970, they added that to my group. So I spent 4 years commuting back and forth between Long Island and Puerto Rico, with my principal residence being in Puerto Rico, because that manufacturing company had a very bigger product base and a bigger customer base.
Give us the name of that product.
It was called euphonics, and euphonics is a Greek word meaning beautiful sound.
Unfortunately, you almost put me out of business.
Yeah, well,
it was a product before its time.
it really was before its time, and unfortunately we didn't know a lot about ultrasonics at that time, and the product we made down in Puerto Rico and tested in the high heat and humidity climate conditions we had down there, when we shipped those products into the United States, they operated quite differently, and our principal customer was ADT. And I went through a period of time where I experienced a rejection rate of about 100% of all the product that we sent out. Finally, I had to go up to ADT with every shipment, along with the technician, and we would walk test and readjust the ultrasonic motion detectors in their plant in Clifton, New Jersey.
And that was a self-contained unit, transmitter, receiver in a box. And
yeah, well, the principal product was that. It was a small one, and it actually had an AC outlet on the back at 110 volts. And I learned from some of our customers that they had unique applications. There was a couple in Michigan where a woman sent a product back to us, and it was all burnt up, and she said that what she used it for, both she and her husband worked, and she would plug in an electric frying pan into this AC outlet in the back, and about 4:30 in the afternoon, an hour or so before she left work, she would call her own phone number, and the ringing phone would set off the ultrasonic motion detector and turn on her electric frying pan.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah. And somebody called in the middle of the day, apparently, set this thing off, and the pan caught on fire with the grease in it and burned up the kitchen, including this thing, but she wanted another one just like it.
That's an amazing story.
did you charge any extra for that service? Or
No,
that,
no,
option?
but I mounted that unit on the wall in our engineering department. I said, took a burning and kept on churning. You know?
What was the next accomplishment in your career? Where did you go after you left that?
In 1974, Borns became disenchanted with the security business and decided to dissolve it, and I won't go into the details of that, but I took a job then with one of my principal private label companies, which was Morse Products Manufacturing in Silmar, California. I went up there as a vice president general manager and stayed for more than 20 years, actually.
George, right?
Yeah, George Lippert had been with me in both enterprises, both with what we had called Born Security System, which was the successor to Euphonics, and then George was VP of sales at Morse when I joined Morse.
And you're a unique one from the standpoint, you've seen all sides. You've seen the manufacturing, you've seen the distribution, you've seen industry, you've seen the PR side of it. So where do you see the industry going?
Well, you know, I see it going in several different directions. You know, I think one of the biggest innovations during the period of time that I was in it was the development of product itself, which we can attribute largely to the electronics industry. The development of integrated circuits and microprocessors allowed us to make digital dialers, control equipment, and passive infrareds at much lower costs, which broadened the market for alarm systems. Now what I'm seeing is that the larger companies are being diversified into the broader aspects of security. They're getting involved in things like homeland security, not only on the federal level, but on the state and local levels, which opens up new opportunities for them in what we're calling integrated systems or enterprise systems. We come up with new terms for all these. And the smaller companies in their community are able to offer more diversified services. It's amazing. Now you go into, I'm building a home now out in Northern California, and the alarm company in town is actually called an Easy Living Center. They not only install and monitor alarm systems, but they put in central vacuum system, satellite TV dishes, hi-fi systems, audio and visual things like
home integrated.
Exactly. They're doing everything for the home, although their principal core business was alarm systems.
Do you see that that's the way the industry is going?
I think it will for some dealers. You know, some of the larger alarm companies like and independent alarm companies like Bay, obviously they've got a focus group, although they're obviously diversified too. I think they have a phone company. They started off with it. They had an answering company, a telephone answering company many years ago. So they've seen opportunities for diversification and grasp. And I think the intelligent dealers in the industry will continue to do that. Opportunities will crop up periodically and frequently, and the smart ones will take advantage of it.
One of the things I have a question for you, though, is after you left Morse, rather than retire, you decided to become involved in the industry as a director of SIA. Right?
Yes. Well, you know, at that time, Charlie, you know, as a past president of SIA, that SIA had a number of problems in the mid-90s. 95, I think, is when they began. One of those problems was an apparent alienation that we had created between SIA and the other two principal trade associations, CSA and NDFA, and that was precipitated by the initial development of educational programs by SIA. And their initial educational program, of course, was the Central Station Operators Course, and of course the dealers and the Central Station.
That was the first one?
That was the first
Amazing.
one, and of course it was seen as that we were treading on somebody else's turf. So we had that alienation there. We also had the expiration of our show sponsorship contract with the Reed people for the ISC shows, which was the principal source of income for SIA, so that had to be renegotiated. And we also had one other issue. We had such an instability in the staff at SIA that the SIA members didn't feel secure in dealing with staff members because 3 months later they would be gone.
Right.
So whether the enterprise was standards or education or PR or anything, we needed to stabilize the staff so that our members felt that we really had an organization was going. So those are the three issues that came up, and the board of SIA at the time thought that I could address myself to those three issues. Also, the fellow that I had picked out to be the executive director of SIA after 2 years decided he didn't like that end of the business, and he quit. So the vacancy occurred, and I was asked to step in, and I did, and I was very happy that I did.
You did. I think that being one of the board members, I just felt that you did an excellent job.
Well,
you did a wonderful job in not only holding it together, but setting the benchmark for where we are today.
Right. Well, thank you. I think one of the most significant things that happened during that period of time was the renegotiation of the show contract with Reed for ISC. I had been, as the president of SIA in the previous negotiation in 1991, I had become familiar with the statistics of shows, and I could see that we could demand a much greater portion as our share of the royalties for the show. So the contract that we were able to negotiate in 1996 was much more beneficial to SIA. And then as the aftermath to that, I'm also proud of the fact that I convinced the board of directors of SIA to share a great deal of that money through grants for educational programs and fighting the false alarm program with the other two associations. So I think that served to mend the fences that had been
which are continuing to get better.
I hope so.
You've done a fabulous job, and I notice now that, of course, you're wearing a press badge, and I do find that I read your articles monthly. If you just give us a quick overview of that.
Well, thank you. I mean, they call my column, I guess, Industry Insider, and I have complete freedom. I can write about anything that I want to, and Sometimes I address some of the same issues that the associations are addressing, and sometimes I try to make it more personal. Just recently, I decided to call attention to the readers of that magazine that there are people in this industry who are really our go-to guys, and one of them sitting next to me right here, Ralph Sevenar, who's done such a great job out in the Northeast, and then George Gunning out on the West Coast, and his work fighting the problems they were having with the city of Los Angeles about alarm response, and also before that they had an issue, I think, with the IBEW, a training program for technicians in the industry that might have been too arduous for the industry to compete with, except for George's efforts in establishing a course that would put our technical people through the rigors that they had to accomplish in order to become certified under the new law. So I'm glad to have a forum, to have an outlet where I can speak.
Security Products Magazine. Right?
Security Products Magazine, right.
I think you've done a great job. I enjoy reading your column monthly.
Thank you.
Ron, if someone was entering into the alarm business, the electronic security business, or the structured side of it, the integrated services side, what would you tell them? What would be the words of wisdom you'd provide them with?
Well, I think I would tell them, first of all, to become familiar with the industry as it exists today, and also to listen to the leaders, the people who have been in the industry for a long period of time, because the experiences that these people have gone through are an invaluable education. But then I would say, don't become preoccupied with the past or the present, but use your imagination for the future. As I said before, I think opportunities continue to come up for diversification of the business, and I think people who are blinded to those opportunities are going to miss out on a great deal of growth and satisfaction. I think we all feel that we have to continue to grow during our careers and become more professional, and I would advise people to take advantage of every opportunity they can.
The reciprocal of that would be the manufacturing side. We've seen so many manufacturers come into this industry and, like an about face, all of a sudden get out, both on manufacturing as well as maybe on the services side. Maybe you could spend a minute, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, obviously over a period of 35 years, we've seen a lot of companies come and go. I remember some of the ISC shows back in the 70s and the early 80s. And if you had a roster of the exhibitors in those shows and tried to compare it with what's around now, you'd see that 80% of those people are gone and there are new people in. But I think the most significant development that I think that attests to the maturity even of the manufacturers in this industry is the recent advent of acquisitions by big foreign companies and big U.S. companies. GE being in our business now, Siemens, Bosch from the West Coast. Honeywell's been in the business for a long time, but obviously has made an increased commitment in buying the Pitway Group. Sure. So I think we're becoming big time. Finally, we're becoming big time. And I think with the resources that some of these larger companies bring to us, we're going to see the next step in the evolution of security, both in the way of products and in the way of services. You know, obviously the ideal security system for a residential program is, what's the first thing you do when you go into your house? You turn the doorknob of your front door. Sure. Now that should do something to your alarm system and everything. And when you leave, the same thing. You close the door, you lock the door, and that should be the turning on of the alarm system. And I think we will get to that where it'll become fully automated. And I think we'll also get to the point where alarm systems will become part of the basic planning of all structures and premises. That is, that at the same time they're designing HVAC and electrical and plumbing, things like that, the security systems and the communication systems will be integrated in that. I recently wrote an article about tube wiring, and I experienced this summer in the Midwest, houses that were being built with PVC tube. I think they call it Smurf tubing throughout the house. And all the wiring can be done after that. It's put up during the framing process. And
so it's strictly a conduit to snake other
yeah,
wires.
Sure. And the telephone company and your computer people and your TV and everybody else.
Typically that's done in commercial, but now they can do
exactly.
They can do that in residential.
And this installer who is doing it was originally an alarm installer.
Is
And
that
now
right?
he's specialized in putting tubing
Smurfs.
in, not only for,
Yeah,
Smurf, not
okay.
only for his company, but for other alarm companies in the area. Whoever gets the job can move right in.
I have one now. You have emceed many of our functions in our industry, and probably others
Very
that
well,
we're
I
not
might
even aware
add.
of. But you must have, and you've told some very funny stories. Do you have one that you might be able to relate
This
to
is
us?
a G
Something that-
audience, by the way.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
yeah,
like,
well, yeah.
something that you might have, some anecdotal stories.
Well, you know, I always have a propensity to see the humorous side of almost any situation. And let me preface this little story by saying that I think one of the most satisfying experiences I had, although it wasn't necessarily effective, was the several years where we would have these legislative blitzes.
Oh,
And
yes.
we would
On
dealers and
Congress.
managers, we would go to Washington,
Washington.
D.C., and then we would pair up in teams and go talk to a senator and this and that. And for me, it gave me a great feeling because the interaction then between the manufacturers and the dealers and everything was so great, the rapport. You know, I just thought it was a great time for us. And I was president of SIA at the time, so it must have been about 1991. And I was out in California, and George Gunning was paired up with me, and we were assigned to go talk to Senator Alan Cranston, as a senator from California at the time. And we sat in the office, and I started off, and I explained to Senator Cranston that I was the president of the Security Industry Association, and I tried to outline the issue to him that the telephone companies were trying to get into our business, and it was unfair competition, and this and that. And then I went on, and I told him about the impact this would have on a small businessman in the state of California who employed 10, 12, 15 people or something like that. And then I went on to introduce George Gunning. Well, George is, you know, although he was in California, he's originally from Brooklyn.
Right.
And so George says to Senator Cranston, he says, yeah, us guys want to know what you guys is going to do about those guys trying to get in our business. And Senator Cranston looked at me, he says, are you sure Mr. Gunning doesn't belong in Senator D'Amato's office?
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, look, we've enjoyed having you today. This
Well,
has been,
thank you.
this has
Any
been
final thoughts
enlightening
at
for
all,
us.
or?
And, do you have something that you might be able to relate?
Yeah, I do have one. I think, you know, I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the image of our industry, and I think it's improving, but for the most part, I don't think it's still very good. All of the free PR we get seems to be adverse. It has to do with false alarms or the people that we used to call trunk slammers, fly-by-night companies that get into the business and then don't perform service and get out of it. And so one of my missions, I might use that word, has been to get the industry, as an industry, involved in community service work or pro bono work. And I'm proud to say that I established the Saints Foundation a few
Which
years
is
ago.
still ongoing.
Still ongoing, and we outfitted 200 churches that were the victims of arson with burglar and fire alarm systems at no charge to them. We segued from that into doing some work for Habitat for Humanity. We've done several hundred units for them, and that's also ongoing. And I would like to see the industry embrace that kind of a program a little more actively. We have 13 units going up in the Bronx right now, Habitat units in the Bronx right now that need to be outfitted. Assa Abloy, a Swedish company who has come into our industry, has made a commitment, and all of the Habitat homes for the next 3 years, they're going to supply all the door hardware.
And aren't they tied in? Isn't one of the sponsors the New York Giants?
Well, it's specifically Medico, which is part of the Assa Abloy team, and
Right.
Headed up by Bob Cook, a past president of SIA, has dedicated these units in the Bronx are particularly high-risk places, and Medico is putting their high security locks on the front door, and they actually worked on the building, and they were able to convince the New York Giants to send a football team to send people in, and they worked together on building these units, and the Giants were so impressed by the program, they threw this big party after the build, and
That's great.
we have a video on that.
And that was
which
you
can be
initialized that.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of that, and I hope that it carries on. If I leave any legacy in this industry at all, I would wish that that's what it would
Well,
be.
you've got a lot of legacies, and I'm delighted to have you as a friend and a friend of the industry. So
Well, thanks
thanks very
Ralph.
much.
Charlie?
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.